evening and welcome to Plugged In. I'm Minister Ryan Turner.
I'm Cheryl Banks.
And I'm Lauren Boone.
And we are so excited that you all have tuned in on tonight. Tonight is an opportunity for us to come together as young adults and have great conversation that we would probably not otherwise have as a collective. So check in wherever you are on Facebook, on YouTube. Hit us up in the chat and let us know in the country, in the state, in the world where you are.
Absolutely. And while you're checking in, I think it's important to let you know who we are. We are the Young Adult Ministry at New Psalmist Baptist Church, and we're located at 6020 Marion Drive, Baltimore, Maryland, 21215. And our pastor is none other than Bishop Walter Scott Thomas Sr.
The Bishop Walter Scott Thomas Sr. Lauren, what are you looking forward to most today?
So I'm looking forward to just having this space. I'm so thankful for our church New Psalmist to allow us this time to talk and check in with each other to see, how we feel about what's happening in America. As young adults, we go through a lot, and so it's just an awesome, I feel, time to be together.
That's
Absolutely.
Right.
I think it's so important to have an avenue where we can discuss relationships, family, faith, and what's happening in the world and the impact it has on us, especially race and racism today.
That's right. There is a lot going on in the world, in and around us. And so there's a lot to talk about. Our conversation today is going to be moderated by Reverend Joshua Thomas, who is our ministry lead here at New Psalmist. And so we're really excited to engage in this conversation. So y'all ready?
Let's get plugged in.
Good evening. I'm so glad to have the opportunity tonight to share and to moderate this conversation. We're here at the church. We're in the building on the pulpit. Though we're not able to gather collectively in worship, we had an opportunity to come together to have a conversation. There's a lot going on in our world, and over the last couple of months in our nation, we have been shocked and even disgusted at what we've been seeing. Many of us grew up in school and hearing stories of the civil rights movement. We saw the different videos, Eyes on the Prize, different specials we would watch. We would see the racism, we would see the classism, we would see the Jim Crow laws in effect through the 50s and 60s especially. And then we hear the I Have a Dream speech. We would hear about voting rights. We would hear about civil rights movement. And we thought that things had changed. But over the last couple of weeks, last couple of months, many of us as young adults, as millennials, have been watching as it seems as though scenes from the 50s and 60s have been on replay. And it's not just things that were recorded on black and white footage, but now we're seeing in HD that racism is still alive, that many of the things we thought we wouldn't experience in our lifetime have come and smacked us in the face and are causing us to now say, what must we do? How will we be relevant? How will we respond to what we're seeing? Our pastor, Bishop Thomas, has a line where he says that every generation of African Americans in the United States of America has a moment, a point of reckoning where they have to face racism head on and decide what will they do. Will they go silently into the night, or will they stand up for their rights to help for future generations that are coming forward? And so today we're getting an opportunity to just talk. Because things are shut down, we're not able to gather around our normal friendship circles. We're not able to gather around the proverbial water cooler at work and talk about what we're seeing. But we have an opportunity today to have a conversation, to be real. We're in the church, but we're not having a holy conversation. We're not going to put on airs talking in King James language, but we're going to be real, because the reality is this is what we're facing. And as holy as you may be, as great of a Christian you might be, even as a young adult, the reality is if you've been able to see the things that have been happening over the last couple of months and not have an unholy side rise up in you, something might not be right. If I was preaching, I would say, can I get an amen right there?
Amen.
And so today we have some of our leaders in our young adult ministry and some young adults from the church here, and we're just going to share. So I want to throw a question out as we kick off our conversation. What are some of the things that you guys have been feeling over the last couple of weeks and last couple of months as we have seen incident after incident of racism popping up in our nation?
So there have been a mixture of emotions. To use the word traumatized, I don't think is an overreach, especially to see the videos of watching someone take their last breath, right, at the hands of someone that swore to protect, right? All communities. It's put me in a place of sadness, of anger, of confusion, of even feeling paralyzed and hopeless, feeling like, what more can I do, right, to help this issue? What more can I do within my own community to move our agenda forward so that these kinds of things don't continue to happen, so that our kids, right, don't have to repeat, right, what we're living right now. It's been a host of emotion.
I have been feeling frustrated and I'm tired. It seems like it's the song that never ends because you see the constant struggle of the sensory overload, especially when you have a person in leadership that's spewing hate on a constant basis, which means whatever is seen on TV, you never know what child is watching because the children can then turn around and say, oh, well, I don't like you because you look different from me. And it's upsetting to see the videos over and over on replay and not have a sense of humanity to feel like you want your spirit to jump out and push that man off of somebody else that you can see that you slowly taking somebody's life. Like, how can you sleep at night? So it's just frustrating.
My experience has been interesting in the sense of I have yet to watch any of the videos. I've only heard stills and had conversations with people because I know that my emotional well-being will be severely impacted by seeing someone die. Because at the end of the day, we are watching people die. And that's something that I'm not prepared to do because it keeps happening.
And I think for me, watching the videos and being on social media, it's re-traumatizing each time that someone is posting the video or a picture. And then it's also bringing up levels of fear almost because for the young females who were murdered, they're not getting the same attention or the same justice that's happening. And for me, I'm starting to work out outside and seeing all of these hangings start to pop up, it just gives me a sense of fear.
And you touched on something that's so interesting. We grew up, all of us are born in the 80s, some later in the 80s than others up here. And as we grew up, we were never exposed to overt racism. We grew up in a world where we were sold the pipe dream or taught the lie that, you know, blacks and whites were equal in everybody's eyes. You know, we came of age, for most of us, our first presidential election, we got to vote for a black man. And so we've come of age where everything we've seen in society would tell us that everyone sees us as equal, as peers. But the videos that we're seeing are telling us really for the first time that everything you thought, everything you were raised on, that was nice and it sounded good. You may have, you know, had some white friends or multiracial circles, but the reality is racism still is alive and well in this nation. And for our parents' generation and their parents' generations, they grew up knowing that. So when they heard the stories, though there was a level of outrage, they were not shocked. For us, when we see it, not only is it traumatizing to see, but now it causes us to question everything we've learned.
That's right. That's right.
For me, you know, I went to a predominantly white middle, high school, and then college. It's causing me to go back and rethink experiences where I may have thought maybe I just got the short end of the stick because I might not have been, you know, good enough. Was there really something else at play that wasn't in our consciousness, but now we're seeing maybe it should have been?
Yeah, you know, and to underscore that, I think that it was systemic racism and is systemic racism that has caused folks to believe that we exist in a post-racial era, right? Racism didn't go away. They hid it within systems.
It's almost a veil.
Yeah.
It's a veil
It's
of
always there.
not
It's
existing.
a blindness.
And I'm certain that every person here has a story and an experience and an encounter that they remember maybe from their childhood that says, oh, I remember being told, oh, our pool's closed today. You can't swim. I was in the 3rd grade. But then I'm going back home to my mom saying, oh, the neighbor won't let us swim today. But then I hear your children swimming. It's that veil. So you didn't know it was just, oh, no, it's okay. She's still my friend.
So many of us now are going back in the recesses of our minds to underscore what you said again, Josh. All right, and we're thinking on the experiences now that we've had as children and going, hold on, that was racism. Or wait a minute. And now I'm even thinking about, and Carter G. Woodson wrote this book, The Miseducation of the Negro, and it makes me think about this, right? And how we look at, the curriculum that's placed in our education systems, right? And how we have been taught basically a watered down version of our own history. Right, so we've just celebrated Juneteenth, right? And as a result of having celebrated Juneteenth, that is not a holiday that is in our history books. Right. We had to go and find out what that was to understand this is a part of who we are. And we do have a holiday where we can celebrate our own freedom-ish.
Right.
Right. Correct.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's so valid because our history has been told by persons who aren't us. That's right. And in many cases, the story, we've been hearing, there was a lot of conversation recently over the destruction of Black Wall Street. Yes. And that was never taught in a history book. I learned about it through, just hearing it and searching it on the internet years ago. But no one's ever shared that there was a Black community that decided to be self-sustaining and they raised up millionaires. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When people say it now, there's always a question of, well, would that really work? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Folks say, you put out the tweet or put out an Instagram post saying, buy Black. And everybody says, that's great. And then goes and shops at the stores owned by everybody else.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But the reality is we have a template. Yeah. For what it is, and this is where for those of us, we are millennials. We're born in the 80s. We have never had to fight to feel equal. Yeah. But then we hear the story of, say, a Black Wall Street, and you hear of the estimated number of persons that died, 300 or so. Then the millions upon millions lost. And then you hear nobody was ever tried for it. Mm-hmm. Just recently are we seeing justice for other tragic events that happened even in the 50s and 60s. Mm-hmm. And then we bring that to 2020. We're watching that it takes the country to be on fire for a police officer who's on video with his knee in the back of a man to be indicted. And the country has to keep burning for the charges to be upgraded. Then it takes a video to go out months later in Georgia of a man who's just out getting his workout on, trying to activate his beach body. And 2 or 3 white guys say, we're going to take care of him. And we're going to record it. And that in and of itself, I don't know about you guys, but when you're growing up, if you're gonna do something that might not be right, you're gonna make sure don't nobody record it.
Right, exactly. Right. Exactly.
See, now some of them are a little bit more holy than I am, but whenever you're around friends, especially in your BC days, because we all saved now. Thank you, Jesus. Hallelujah through the blood. But in your BC days, if y'all was out somewhere and it wasn't supposed to be in the evidence, the first thing you say, because we grew up with camera phones, is everybody put that phone away. Yes. And you all had the one friend. That one. Right?
Had to pull that phone
we
out.
all have the one friend who gonna pull out the phone and gonna have the flashlight on with it so everybody knows. It's like, come on, man. You ain't even smart enough to turn the flashlight off. But now we're seeing these white vigilantes that say, we're gonna record us killing this man. And it takes months for even an investigation to go into the case. And then it takes the whole world crying out before they're arrested. And we're seeing all of this. And we're having to reconcile, how do we move forward? How do we act? Cheryl and Courtney, you guys talked about the trauma we face. I would suggest that every person who sees these videos either is traumatized or has something wrong with them. It's impossible to watch somebody die and there not be some type of emotional, psychological response. You know, working in ministry, at times we get called to the hospital or standing with a family, you know, a grieving family or somebody as they transition. And there's a part of you every time that hurts. You can't watch a man calling out for his mama, a grown man. This ain't, you know, a teenager saying, mama. This a grown man in his 40s with kids crying out for his mama, and police officers don't move. And if we're not careful, because we have not been built for this, you know, kids growing up in the 50s, 40s, 60s, they were conditioned for having to fight for your rights. So when they heard stories of a hanging or a lynching or someone going down south and not coming back home, they were sad and irritated, but there had been some conditioning for that. Whether that was grandma or mama telling the story of when it happened for their generation. But for us, we didn't sit around the table at, you know, Thanksgiving and Christmas with our parents talking about what it was like to watch friends or watch persons that they know go through this. So now we're hit with it, and it's traumatizing because we never expected to see it. Right. We never expected to live through it. And Lauren, you spent time in the South. You were born in Baltimore, moved to Atlanta. Oftentimes we hear that the South is more racist than the North. What was it like growing up, especially in those formative years, in the South, having come from the North?
Yeah, well, for me, I mean, we moved to a predominantly black neighborhood, so I felt as if it was home. Everyone was welcoming, but I really realized that I was in the South and in Georgia when I left at the perimeter of Atlanta. That's when things got serious. It's like, okay, you start to see the Confederate flags. I mean, multiple flags just flying around. That's something you don't see in Baltimore. And so I had to have a conversation then with my mom and my dad and my older sister at that point, like, what does this mean? Because at that point, we really hadn't discussed, like, a Confederate flag. And my dad would be so upset when he saw one, but I'm like, can you unpack this a little bit for me? Like, what does it mean? And then once we got into the meaning of it and we understood, like, the history, I was like, well, why are they still able to fly? Like, why are they still able to have these flags up? And there was one antique store in Athens, Georgia, when I was in high school, that people were trying to protest to get shut down. And I mean, for a month, they were able to still sell these relics and these antiques of the Confederacy. And it's just like, why is this still a thing when you know the history and you know the trauma that it has done to black people in America, and you still, it's like trophies. It's like, we are proud to have been white supremacists. We are proud to have been murderers to a whole race of people. And so for me, it was really just I don't want to say conditioning, but I kind of felt like it was a conditioning. Like, I had to condition myself to be a certain way, to present a certain way when I left the perimeter of Atlanta. And then I went to school in South Georgia, Statesboro, Georgia, and that's when I really saw the ugly head of racism with just people calling us niggers, if I may, to my face. My college roommate, freshman roommate, called me a nigger, and her friend said she wouldn't share a shower with me because of the color of my skin. And I'm like, well, see, now I am from Baltimore, so don't get it twisted. So you know, it's just disgusting. I mean, it's no other words. And to answer your first question, Reverend Joshua, is I felt helpless when I first heard the news of Aubrey and Brianna, and then George, and now Rashad. It's just too many, and it's back to back to back. And then it's like, some people are heard of, some people are not. And these are just the people that we know of because of either video or they get, you know, mentioned in the newspaper or on the news. And it's like, what about the millions or thousands of brothers and sisters who lost their lives to these senseless acts that we have no idea about. It's like something has to happen, but like you said, we grew up with blinders on, and now we're placed in a position where we have to teach younger children and the younger generations how to live in a world that may not change in our lifetime. And that's something that we really have to consider now, because it hasn't changed. It has not changed. And so we have to really figure out where we're going to align ourselves to be able to teach our younger children. And that's a battle.
The old saying is, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah.
And if we're not careful, this moment will be repeated for the next generation. Yeah. And so we have the obligation and the responsibility to our children and our children's children to fight and to stand up for them today, so that the next George or the next Rashad gets home, so that the next time the Brianna's in her house and the police get there by mistake, they can walk back out the door and go to the place they were supposed to be going. And she can tell that story around the coffee table, that you won't believe what happened to me. Not you'll see and won't believe what happened to me. The narrative has to change. And we have to do our part to make life better, as we say in New Psalmist, to make life better for somebody else. So we're going to pick back up on this conversation, sharing a little bit about what our next steps can be. But let's go into worship for a little bit, because we know that with all that we're facing, with all that's going on, we gain our strength through the Lord. And as we worship him, God feeds our soul and pours back into us to give us the strength to handle what we're going to face. So our praise team, our young adult singing aggregation, is going to lead us into worship for a little bit, and then we're going to come back up and pick back up at this conversation.
Praise the Lord, New Psalmist. If you know that Jesus has everything in control and that he will take care of it, just rock with us. Jesus will, and who will make But we just slow it down and we say, for I know that Jesus will. For I know Jesus will. For I know Jesus will. Everybody sing. For I know Jesus will. For I something about your name. Some call him Master and Savior. Jesus, let all heaven and earth proclaim that kings and kingdoms shall all pass away, but there's something about the name. King and kingdom shall all pass away, but there's something, but there's something, but there's something about that name.
So we are so glad that you're still hanging out with us on Plugged In as we continue this conversation. This is something that is, for many of us, I would say, is cathartic. You know, it's an opportunity for us to share, and we hope that as you're watching this in your home or wherever you might be on YouTube or Facebook, that this is also helping you to process what we're facing. Because the reality is, all of us have different stories. On this stage alone, each of us has a story of how we've been impacted by racism in America, even in our 30s or our almost 30s, 20s. We have all been impacted one way, shape, or form. For some of us, there have been stories that we had to take a step back from later and think back on it and say, it's probably because I was black that happened to me. There's stories that I go back to on high school or even middle school, things that happened that I thought just were, you know, the bad draw of the cards. That when I began to replay them, I said there may have been something else at work. But then there are other stories that immediately you know right away, this is only happening to me because I'm black. Randy, can you share a story of when you realized that you were in a situation solely because of the color of your skin?
So about 3.5 years ago, I was at work, got there early, and cleaning my car out. I seen one of my coworkers pull in, and I seen her quickly pull out. And within like 3 minutes later, I'm seeing 12 police cars pull into the lot, guns blazing. So after the whole situation was over, I figured out what was going on, went to employee relations, and they basically was like, oh, well, okay, we'll write it down. I'm like, well, is she gonna be reprimanded? Like, this is serious. I could have lost my life. And they was like, well, she'll be reprimanded. But come to find out, it's happened before with other coworkers, and nothing's ever happened. I'm like, okay, so she's still here. When is enough enough?
Wow, and that's such a critical point. We've seen, in Central Park a couple of weeks ago, lady walking her dog, sees a black man and decides that she wants to flex her whiteness on him. Gives him a command, and she doesn't know that he's educated. And he says, no, not only am I not going to do what you want me to do, I'm going to record it so everybody can see what's really happening. She called 911, starts screaming, choking her dog at the same time. I'm waiting for, dog rights folks to come after her for that. But we saw it, and many of us have seen that at play, where, what we're seeing on social media, where the Karens of the world rise up and have no regard for our rights, who don't even give the benefit of the doubt. As the reality is, as black in America, we are always trained to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And that's probably, I would even argue to say, that's part of why the events of the last couple of months have caught so many of us off guard. Because we are trained up to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Somebody says something's racist, we say, well, maybe it's not that. Because we want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. But we are in a society where we are often not given the benefit of the doubt. And it doesn't just happen, in communities, but it happens in the boardroom. It happens in situations where persons don't value African American experience or input. Have any of you guys ever seen in those situations where you watched it firsthand and your jaw dropped, seeing how black experience or black stories were completely disregarded?
I know for me, I work with the youth, and one young person had came to me and told me that they had disclosed something racial that had happened to them. And when they went to talk to a trusted adult, all they said was, I hear you. And that kind of made me upset, because it comes a point where it's like, I hear you is not enough. It's, what are you gonna do? Where's the action behind it, so that we really and truly can feel like we're equal? If you hear me, then there will be steps that you take to fix the problem.
Right, it's like, I don't wanna hear that you hear me. I wanna hear that you're changing because of what I said.
One of the things that we've been talking about.
Oh, Brian, make sure your mic's on, sir.
My mic's on now. Well, one of the things that we've been talking about is being overtly racist, right? But what about the folks that are silently complicit? The white folks who are silently complicit. And I think that, to your point, Courtney, there has to come a time, right, when you use your voice, you use your platform, you use your privilege in order to move systems and structures where structural racism exists. It's not enough to say, oh, again, I hear you. It's not enough to say, oh, well, what should I read? But how are you leveraging your privilege? The privilege that you weaponize
Yes.
against us in order to get to where you want to go and do what you need to do. How do you now use that privilege and that voice in order to deconstruct structural racism?
And you hit on something that's so key. If you don't say anything, you're complicit. Yeah. It's, police officers are sworn, they have a sworn duty to activate if they see a crime taking place. That's why it's a little ironic that police officers have been captured standing by as crimes take place. But that's another topic for our next conversation. But the reality is whenever they're in, and so one of our police officers, Minister Orlando Lilly, who was a member of New Psalmist, he's the major in the Baltimore County Police Department. And he was telling me the story one day. He was on his way to work, and as he was driving up the highway, he saw a car stopped, and they were having a problem. And he was in a patrol car. He was in another county. Wasn't in his county, wasn't in Baltimore County, but because he was an active duty police officer, he said, I have to pull over because I need to make sure that everybody's okay. And they had a duty. He could not be complicit and just drive by. He had to stop because that was his responsibility.
That's right.
And I believe that with all that's happening in our nation right now, everybody has a responsibility to choose which side you're gonna be on. Either you're gonna support rights for all, or you are gonna support some having rights that others don't. There's no such thing as separate and unequal anymore. You know, if you're either in it or you're not.
That's right.
And if you're not, you can't get upset when the persons who are fighting for equality start fighting against you.
Hello.
Because if you are not helping us, then you are just in the way. And it's something that I find very interesting, especially in the Christian world. There are many leaders in Christianity, many who are stepping up, many white pastors and white Christians who are standing up to support the cause. But then there are others who are silent. And just the other week, there was a very well-known white pastor who shared a video talking about, trying to say this in the best PC way.
Go there.
Talk about
Go
it.
there.
We
Come on,
talking
tell the
real.
truth.
How
Right,
talk.
tell
the
truth.
sins again, what happened to us, essentially, black folks need to just get over it. There was a quote, I saw another pastor put a quote out that said, it was the will of God for African Americans to be slaves. It was the grace of God that allowed them to come through it. And, you know, I have a master's
church, right?
divinity degree. I have, I'm an ordained elder in the Baptist church. I've never seen anybody put the emphasis on the grace to survive it and not the covering to go in it. I've always looked at it from the flip side. What was meant for evil, God turned it for your good. I never thought I would see someone say the good was the slavery. That was what was meant for evil. God turned that for the good. But the reality is there's so many persons who are just complicit in the system. And it's our responsibility now as we wrap up our conversation. We're going to have to keep talking. I'm enjoying this.
Yeah.
If you're enjoying this, watching this, I want you to just write in the chat room, text in, tweet in, whatever. Let us know if you're enjoying this conversation. Let us know if you want to hear and see more of this, because we are finding that for us, this is an opportunity to share. And we know that as we are sharing, there's a generation out there that needs to hear this. And part of our responsibility as we now go forward is for us to raise our voice.
That's right.
You know, on this stage, Minister Ryan is leading marches and protests in the streets. That's the calling that he has, to be out on the forefront in the streets. I'm leading a conversation right here. Different ways to approach it, but we are all doing our part. Each of us, some have leadership in organizations in predominantly white institutions. They're raising their voices, writing letters. Others are having conversation on the job. Randy's educating leadership, saying this ain't right. Courtney's working with students, and Cheryl's well, helping them to see, no, these are things that you have to be ready for. And administration, these are realities you need to be able to teach towards. And we are all doing our part. So don't feel like you have to, take up, put, Black Power, walking out in the streets, marching, because that may not be what you can do. But there's so many different avenues that you can do. It may be as simple as posting on your social media page so that somebody may have an awareness that, because the reality is many white persons just don't know. And there are some who are actively complicit, and we'll address that another time. But then there are others who just don't know.
There are others who just don't care, too.
That's true.
So.
And it's our responsibility to make them have to face it head on.
Yeah, and I just want to underscore what you said right there around everybody having a part to play. I've had friends, that called me and said, well, I feel like I'm not doing enough. I feel like I really need to be out there and these different kinds of things. But one of the things that you just listed is that there are a myriad of things, right, that people can do in order to activate the movement. The movement is not one-dimensional. Right? The movement has many moving parts. And just like the Bible speaks about there being many parts to the body, right? We have to understand that in order to mobilize this thing, in order to be able to move it forward, right? We just identify where we plug in and do that work. And as we do that, it works hand in hand together in order to move forward healthily.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And we're going to put together some resources and some methods that you can take up right wherever you are, some websites. The information is right on the screen. You can go to the website, see a lot of different opportunities and avenues for how you can be a part of this movement, because we are believing that God is going to bring us through this. One of the greatest benefits of being a community of believers is that whenever we see evil at work, we're always reminded that God is also at work too. And whatever may be meant for our bad to take us down, we know that God works all things out for those who are called according to his purpose. And so even as we're going through this, we're doing our part, because faith without works is dead. That's what the book says. And we'll talk about that when we come back together a little bit more as well. But we have to do our part and trust that God is going to bring us through. And so you may be watching this conversation today, and you've come from YouTube, from Facebook, someone shared it with you. You've been feeling anxious about what you're facing. You've been wondering if things can ever turn around. But we are here today to encourage you, to say, even though it looks bad, God still has a plan for us. And God is still going to protect us, even as we go out of our doors and walk through the streets, not certain of what we'll face. We know that God is by our side no matter what we go through. And one of the greatest gifts that God has given us is his son, Jesus Christ. He has given his son who had to go through hostile territory. He had to deal with persons who didn't like him just because of what he could do. He had to deal with persons who did their best to kill him. And they killed him on a cross, some over 2,000 years ago. But early on Easter Sunday morning, he rose with all power. And because of his life, because of his resurrection, we know that he has power over everything that we face. And if you're going through something in your life wondering how you're going to face it, I want to give you an opportunity today to accept him as your Lord and Savior, to allow him to come to live into your heart. Because if Jesus lives in your heart, you can face any racism, you can face any discouragements that are going on in your life, because Jesus lives on the inside. So if that's you today, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to pray with me. Our Father, today we admit that we've done wrong. We admit that we've sinned. But today we accept you as our Lord and Savior. We believe that Jesus died on the cross for us. We believe that he rose on Easter Sunday with all power. And we believe that he's seated at your right hand, interceding on our behalf. We accept him in our hearts as Lord and Savior. And we determine and set our minds to live a life that's pleasing in your sight. In Jesus' name, amen. My friend, today, if you prayed that prayer for the first time, I want you to go to our website, go to newpsalmist.org, click right on the e-member tab, fill out the information. We want to stay connected to you. We want to put our arms around you, let you know that the love of Christ is shown here on earth through your brothers and sisters, because we are all on this stage able to talk about the things we're seeing, because we know that the source of our strength is really in God. in his son that lives in our lives. And that same power that got Jesus up from the grave is the same power that will end racism. It's the same power that will help all of us to see each other as equals, to see us all as God's children, to celebrate the differences that we all have, but to hold everybody up as equal in the sight of God. So thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be coming back just shortly with some more conversation, some more sharing. Did you guys enjoy this conversation today?
Oh, yes.
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 So team, tell us how they can stay connected to us.
Well, you can follow us on Instagram, M2_MPBC. Make sure you follow, like, and share with all of your networks. And you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, New Psalmist Baptist Church.
All right, and another way to connect with us is going to be on Sunday mornings at 7:15, 9:30, and noon on YouTube, subscribing to New Psalmist Baptist Church, as well as our website, newpsalmist.org.
We have had powerfully rich dialogue today. And as you all could imagine, we've been at the edge of our seats. I know that you all have been watching on the edge of our seats. So the conversation is not going to end. Please stay tuned with us on all of the outlets that we have mentioned here. And we're going to see you next time. Until next time, be blessed.